With climate crisis posing a constant looming threat, scientists across the globe are joining forces to protect the future of our planet.
Climate change affects everybody in the world. We are all impacted. This is our home, this is our environment. We need to keep the air clean because this is the air that we breathe.
There are tons and tons of toxicologists which are doing environmental toxicology. And these toxicologists are looking at these chemicals very closely, and they are seeing what level of it is safe and after what level is bad. Finding that ratio is what toxicology is important, and that's why they are very important for the climate control.
Today on SOT TV, we're highlighting toxicologists whose research tackles environmental exposures worsened by climate change.
You are watching SOT TV.
SOT TV starts now.
Hi, I'm Tanya Papanicholas. We're back again from the conference floor at SOT 2024. Today's episode of SOT TV is all about exploring toxicologists' role in researching and mitigating environmental threats.
When we look in an unbiased fashion across the entire genome, we tend to identify genetic variants that influence genes that we did not know in advance were related to asthma or COPD in terms of exposures to air pollutants.
We'll sit down with Samir Kelada to discuss how genetic variability affects sensitivity to air pollution.
Wildfire smoke, it's not only something that is local or even national, but it's almost even international. So I do think that it's really a multidisciplinary approach to tackle a problem that is so global.
Then Alexandra Noël will join us to talk about the effects of exposure to burn pit and wildfire aerosols. Plus, we'll catch a glimpse into the research conducted by toxicology leaders in environmental pollutants, health sciences, and exposomics. But first, let's hear from Noël Aluru, whose lab at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution is investigating dangerous toxins found in contaminated shellfish.
Domoic acid is a neurotoxin. It's produced by phytoplankton or the microscopic plants that are in the coastal waters and the open ocean. So when they bloom, these phytoplankton, when they bloom and the population increases, then they cause a lot of hazards. And one of them is they can produce this neurotoxin, domoic acid. And domoic acid can actually bind to some of the receptors in the brain and can cause excitotoxicity. When you eat contaminated seafood is when you are exposed to domoic acid. If you are exposed to chronically to low levels, even below the regulatory limits, you can, one of the impacts of this neurotoxin is you can have memory loss, a short-term memory, and those things will be affected. But what in our research, we had an excellent graduate student a couple of years ago started this work in our group. And what she has shown is that, so we use zebrafish as a model to study some of these effects. So zebrafish are a very good model for developmental model. You can study what happens when the early life stages are exposed. So the concern here is that domoic acid, anybody can be exposed, especially the, pregnant women or older adults. So those are some of the vulnerable population life stages when humans are exposed. For example, when pregnant women are exposed, the fetus is exposed. So, but to understand some of those, you can use fish as a model system because these fish are transparent. There are a lot of tools available that allow us to study individual changes in different cells in the brain as they develop. Yeah, I think current regulation is good, but I think we also need to take into consideration that these low levels of exposure can have effects. So I think we need to show more in terms of what are the effects, and I think definitely more regulation to control about these vulnerable life stages is very important. For older adults as well as children, pregnant women. So there are these sensitive life stages that can be affected by any pollution, let alone just algal toxins.
We appreciate Noël sharing his insights with us. Now let's continue to explore our oceans with the WISE Laboratory of Environmental and Genetic Toxicology. They're investigating the effect of environmental pollutants on wildlife, and in particular, whales.
In the WISE laboratory, we study how environmental chemicals impact health. We study health from what we call a one environmental health perspective. And what that looks at is human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. And each of those is a different window into that health. But if we studied how they're interconnected, we can learn more about health and advance further and more quickly with understanding how toxicants affect health.
The WISE Lab studies chromosome instability and lung cancer, and I share that passion. Chromosomes are one of the coolest structures to look at in the body. They package and protect our DNA, and they have instructions for telling us who we are, how we function, how we develop, how we grow. And we can look at them underneath a microscope, which is pretty cool. I look at chromosome instability from the context of liver disease, and I ask the question, how do environmental chemicals cause liver disease to progress and become more severe?
We're excited that we're going to discover some new ways to tackle the problem of how do we treat and handle cancer.
Well, I think there are lots of things can be done for this area, especially when the climate change happens. So it affects multiple different things. Okay, it affects the people's behavior, it affects the manufacturing procedure, it affects the people's daily life. So, for example, a very important area of toxicology is exposure. Okay, so we are studying the people exposure to many different things. It is greatly affected by climate change.
I think by informing the public about the adverse health effects of air pollution, we can spread awareness so that we can, as a whole, battle climate change to kind of reduce the effects of that affects the world as a whole.
I think toxicology is the biggest part of the puzzle because there are a lot of chemicals that are right now not degraded in the environment, and that's where the whole concept of green chemistry comes in. And the green chemistry, the concept is that these are the compounds that are easily degradable. We live with chemicals day and night, from our clothes to our washing materials to our food. Everything has chemicals, right? So it's all chemicals, but we want to make sure that chemicals are degraded. It's not causing toxicity to ourselves as well as to environment. So we want to find those green chemicals, and that's where the climate toxicologists play a very important role in not just making humans safe, but the climate safe.
This morning we have the pleasure of talking to SOT Secretary Jim Luyendyk. Good morning.
Good morning.
And also we have SOT Education and Career Development Chair Kimberly Hodge-Bell. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
We're excited to talk to you guys, and I know we want to talk about how to stay in the loop with SOT. There are a lot of ways to do that. So Jim, let's start with you. Tell us maybe about the main platforms that you have to communicate with members.
Sure. I think that what SOT really strives to do is kind of meet members where they are with content and with information. So we post everything to the Society's website. Everybody can access all that content there, but at the same time, what we want to do is really have kind of a breadth of strategies where they can access that content in different mediums. So we do have a weekly blog, we have emails that are delivering all that to our members. We're also on social media, we're on LinkedIn, X, what have you, if that's where those folks are. And then we also have a number of innovative strategies where we can actually deliver content online, including YouTube, as well as certain recorded videos and other platforms at the annual meeting.
I know you do have a lot of unique communication programs, including podcasts even.
We do indeed, yeah. So the Adverse Reactions podcast is a personal favorite, and I would encourage everyone who has not listened to this. David Faulkner and Ann Chappell have created an absolute gem. What they've done is they've created a way for SOT members and toxicologists broadly to bring their science down to a level in a 20-minute conversation that gets into the nitty-gritty, but also in a tremendously fun and lighthearted approach to communicate otherwise complex challenges. It's really worth listening to.
And then what about your science talks? I hear those are interesting.
The intoxicating science talks, among others, are recorded and live in perpetuity on the web. This is a fun 15-minute low key, just get people excited about a particular topic, and those are all absolutely worth checking out as well.
I love it. Okay, Kimberly, your turn. So how do SOT's committees and component groups provide information to members?
So one of the ways that the committees and component groups provide information is just by participating, right? Once you're part of these component groups or these committees, it's not just about doing the work for the committee or the component group. That's the way you get started, right? That's the initiating way of you connecting with the society based on your interests. But once you're in there, you learn a lot. You have a lot of networking opportunities. You learn a lot about the society and all of the scientific as well as non-scientific avenues that we have here at the society, and it just helps you to grow, and not only professionally but also personally through these networks and these connections, and there's lots of mentoring opportunities with all of this, so it is a great opportunity.
What do you think makes them such a vital part of keeping the society up and running?
It's about volunteerism, right? And we need you to help volunteer and to support the society as we're looking at new things and how we're going forward and being future forward with it. So a committee is just supporting some of the initiatives and the strategic plan and all of those things that we have as a society that we have out there to ensure that we are, one, growing, and we're continuing to make sure we incorporate things that are going to keep us sustainable for the future.
How do you both recommend that members get more involved with being a part of the society?
I say this, it's like Nike, just do it. There's a lot of different ways to get involved. If you go on ToxExchange, there's a big button that says volunteer. So that's one of the ways that you can go in and create a volunteer profile, so that if you're interested in participating in a committee or component group, that's one way to start. But I also encourage everyone to talk to your colleagues. There are people who are already sitting on these organizations or committees or in these component groups that can give you some insider scoops, like I like to say, and just really helping you to get connected and finding the opportunity to volunteer.
I have so little to add. That was perfect. The only thing that I would say is, beyond just do it, appreciate the value that individuals bring to the society. Some folks might be saying, I don't have a thing to offer, my expertise is here, what I do is this. Everyone's contributions drives the society forward and makes it what it is. So if you're sitting there as someone who wants to volunteer saying, oh, but maybe that's not for me. No, it really is. And touch base the way that Kimberly brought that up, that's perfect.
So I love that there are so many ways to get involved, and you guys make it sound so fun too.
It's easy to make it sound great because it just is. It's awesome to volunteer, it's important for the society, and it's really rewarding personally.
And it's great to get involved because this is our society. And so in order for it to last for perpetuity, we need you to volunteer and get involved.
Okay, people have no excuses. Thank you so much, Jim and Kimberly.
Thank you for having us.
You can keep watching SOT TV on screens around the Salt Palace Convention Center, in your room at select hotels, on the SOT 2024 annual meeting website, on the SOT 2024 event app, and on YouTube and X. This morning, we are very excited to have in studio Samir Kelada, who is Associate Professor of Genetics at UNC Chapel Hill. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Now, you study how environmental factors can lead to conditions like asthma and COPD. Do you feel like we've learned enough about why some people are genetically susceptible?
In the context of air pollution exposure, which is what my lab focuses on, I think the answer is no. And the reason I say that is because the gold standard now is to use unbiased genome-wide searches to identify these genetic variants. And until recently, the tools to be able to do that well have not been widely available. They are becoming available now, and I think the value of conducting those studies is that when we look in an unbiased fashion across the entire genome, we tend to identify genetic variants that influence genes that we did not know in advance were related to asthma or COPD in terms of exposures to air pollutants. So the potential of using these unbiased genome-wide approaches is to make novel discoveries about genes that might be related to asthma and COPD. And what that opens the door to is a better understanding of how air pollutants can affect asthma and COPD, and potentially identify targets that could be used for prevention and treatment approaches.
So what unique methods is your lab using to study this?
The broader question of what makes someone genetically susceptible falls under an umbrella term that we call gene-environment interaction. Identifying these gene-environment interactions in human epidemiologic studies is extremely challenging. So we've turned to model systems where we can basically maximize information about both genetic variation and environmental exposure. And in our lab, we've been using a mouse genetics reference population, a new tool in the mouse genetics community called the collaborative cross. And it's a population that features a lot of genetic variation, so that maximizes our information about the genetic side of G by E. And of course, we can control the environmental exposures to air pollution very precisely, so we can maximize information about both G and E to identify novel genes that affect response to air pollutants. So that we've been using that population for over a decade now, and have made some really exciting discoveries with it in terms of which genetic variants are associated with response to acute exposure.
What do you find most exciting about those findings?
The thing that we've been most excited about is that we identified a locus on mouse chromosome 15. We think we know what the causal gene is at that locus. And what's particularly exciting about it is that we have initial evidence that at the corresponding region in the human genome, which is on chromosome 8, genetic variants there are also associated with response to air pollution in humans, in terms of either acute response to exposure or chronic response as it relates to emphysema. So these findings are, I think, a really important proof of concept example that our approach at using a genetically diverse mouse population as a discovery platform for findings relevant to human health really works.
There's been a lot of talk with climate change and toxicology. So what happens if our understanding of this doesn't keep pace with the changing climate?
The ramifications of climate change for the air pollutant we study the most, which is ozone, is that exposure is going to go up. So I think that just further emphasizes the need to understand why some individuals will be more susceptible than others. Because exposure is going up, that means more people are at risk, and understanding why some people might have more severe responses, I think just becomes more of an imperative.
Well, we're excited to continue following your research, so we'll be watching out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, Samir.
All right.
Now, fully understanding the effects of environmental pollution requires vast amounts of data. The Southern California Environmental Health Sciences Center is using innovative correlation techniques to understand and prevent diseases caused by pollution.
The mission of the Southern California Environmental Health Sciences Center is broadly to develop the investigator teams, the scientific knowledge base, and community engagement needed to reduce the burden of disease caused by environmental exposure. We study effects of air pollution, metals, and persistent organic pollutants, social disparities, and the built environment on major diseases of the brain and lung, on cancer, and metabolic diseases. We investigate effects during critical developmental periods, in vulnerable populations, and across the life course.
The development of certain diseases, they're multifactorial. So we have things that are genetic background, that are behavioral, and diseases that are being caused by environmental factors. So this platform that we are creating with the omic techniques is going to help us to better understand and address those diseases.
We are excited to have in the studio right now Alexandra Noël, who is the Associate Professor of Comparative Biomedical Sciences at LSU. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I know on Monday you chaired a symposium on burn pit and wildfire exposures. What about this topic has drawn you in and made you interested in studying it?
So I studied also the effects of air pollution that contains particulate matter. And what studies have shown is that the effects of particulate matter that comes from air pollution or urban particulate matter are different from the effects of the particulate matter that are found in wildfire smoke. So I thought that was a very interesting interesting finding where in a study they showed that an increase in the concentration of wildfire smoke led to an increase in the numbers of people showing at the hospital for asthma symptoms, and the same increase in general urban particulate matter did not relate in the same increase of asthma symptoms, and therefore that kind of implies that there may be a difference between the effects of particulate matter that comes from the general urban air pollution versus the one from wildfire smoke.
And when you say differences, has wildfire smoke proven more dangerous than regular pollutants?
So that's what we're still investigating on, to see what would be the differences in toxicity for those particulate matter that are found in the wildfire smokes.
Okay, interesting. Well, was it important to draw speakers from multiple disciplines? And if so, why was that important to you?
Wildfire smoke, it's not only something that is local or even national, but it's almost even international. Just like there was an episode of wildfire smoke in Canada, but all the eastern part of the United States received the wildfire smoke. So I think it's really a combination of chemistry, toxicology, engineering, people that are used to do modeling when it comes to where those particles from the wildfires that are generated, how they're going to be transported into the air and to different locations. So I do think that it's really a multidisciplinary approach to tackle a problem that is so global if we really want to find a suitable solution and maybe preventive measures.
Can you talk about the relationship between climate change and wildfire pollution?
So I do think that they're kind of interrelated in the sense that we have seen an increase in global temperatures, and that also leads to the effects that our climate change are leading to an increase in the frequencies of wildfire smoke that are being present both in Canada and in the US. And with the climate change that are still occurring, we may have more episodes of wildfire smoke due to the increased global temperatures. So I think it's more like a vicious cycle where one can affect the other, but it's definitely something that has an impact on climate change.
Well, we're glad you're one of the researchers that's working on it.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alexandra.
Thank you.
Now, in the face of these environmental exposures, how do we measure their impact? How do we work together to mitigate these threats across the globe? The Mount Sinai Institute for Climate Change, Environmental Health, and Exposomics is leading the charge to tackle these questions and more.
Here at Mount Sinai, over the last couple of decades, we've realized that we have to more comprehensively understand the role of multiple environmental factors that are affecting health.
Our health is not getting better. In fact, our health is getting worse as a society. Environment is playing a very key role, and it's something that we really haven't invested in until recently. But if we make that investment, we're going to start to understand why diseases occur. And then once we understand why they occur, we can both prevent them, but also treat them better.
For climate change and the global effects on the different environmental factors that we're all going to be facing and causing health outcomes, we really need to come together on this.
Exposomics is constantly evolving itself, and so we're going to have to keep up with trends, and in many ways we're going to be leading the field, but in other areas we're going to try to keep up with what others are doing. And so if we work together, I think we can actually make this field grow much faster.
That's all for today on SOT TV. If you're itching for more toxicology content or you want to revisit today's interviews, you can keep watching SOT TV on screens around the Salt Palace Convention Center, in your room at select hotels, on the SOT 2024 annual meeting website, on the SOT 2024 event app, and on YouTube and X. Join us tomorrow for our last episode of SOT TV. As you get ready to head back home, we will be focusing on all the ways that toxicology interacts with day-to-day life, from consumer electronics to cosmetics and more. I'm Tanya Papanikolas. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow.